Good evening all. Sir, ഇപ്പം തന്നെ ജോയിൻ ചെയ്തേ. സാറിന് എന്തോ ഒരു ടെക്നിക്കൽ ഇഷ്യൂ ജോയിൻ ചെയ്യുന്നതിൽ. ഇപ്പം തന്നെ ജോയിൻ ചെയ്യും. ഒന്ന് വെയിറ്റ് ചെയ്യണേ. Good evening, sir. Sir, audio mute ആണ്.
ഇപ്പൊ കേൾക്കാമോ?
കേൾക്കാം സർ.
ഇപ്പൊ കേൾക്കാം. ഓക്കെ, ഗുഡ് ഈവനിങ്. അപ്പോളജീസ്, എനിക്ക് പോസ്റ്ററിലെ ലിങ്ക് ഞാൻ ടൈപ്പ് ചെയ്തിട്ട് കിട്ടുന്നില്ലായിരുന്നു. ഞാൻ ഒരു 3:55 മുതൽ ട്രൈ ചെയ്തു. പിന്നെ മാഡത്തിനെ വിളിച്ചു, കിട്ടിയില്ല. പിന്നെയാണ് ലിങ്ക് അയച്ചത്. അതുകൊണ്ടാണ് സോറി, ഐ വാസ് ലേറ്റ്. ഞാനത് ഒരു 3:55 മുതൽ ട്രൈ ചെയ്യാൻ തുടങ്ങി. But I did not I obviously did not type it in properly. അതെ, ആരാ സംസാരിക്കുന്ന ഇപ്പോ? മാഡം ആണോ? എന്തോ?
ഞാൻ സ്റ്റുഡന്റ് കോർഡിനേറ്റർ ആണ്.
ഓ, വെരി ഗുഡ്, വെരി ഗുഡ്. ഐ കൻ സീ യു. വെബ് അഡ്മിൻ GLC എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. അഖില. ഓക്കെ, ഹലോ അഖില. അപ്പൊ നമുക്ക് തുടങ്ങാമോ അഖില?
നമുക്ക് സ്റ്റാർട്ട് ചെയ്യാം.
അതെ, നമ്മൾ എത്ര മണി വരെയാണ് അഖില? നമുക്ക്
5 മണി വരെ.
5 മണി വരെ. ഇപ്പൊ ഓൾറെഡി 4:15 ആയല്ലോ.
നമുക്ക് വെൽക്കം അഡ്രസ്സോട്
എന്താ?
വെൽക്കം അഡ്രസ്സോട് കൂടി
നമുക്ക് വെൽക്കം ഒക്കെ മാറ്റി വെച്ചാലോ, സമയം ഇല്ലാത്തതുകൊണ്ട്? അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ബ്രീഫായിട്ട് പറയാം.
ബ്രീഫായിട്ട് എന്നാലും വെൽക്കത്തോടെ.
അതെ, ആരെങ്കിലും പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ അവർ പ്രിപ്പയർ ചെയ്ത് കാണുമല്ലോ.
Participants, we are of our certificate course. Let's begin the session with welcome address. My mic, Suri Aisa,
That's
a very good evening to one and all present here. With immense pleasure, I would like to welcome Professor Mohan sir, a leading voice on judicial reform and justice in India, who had been the head of National Judicial Academy of Supreme Court of India from 2006 to 2011. Since 2011, Mohan sir heads the National Court Management System Committee of Supreme Court of India, a former Vice Chancellor of National Law School of India, Bangalore, and also a former member of various regulatory bodies, including Law Commission of India, the Security and Exchange Board of India, the Copyright Law Board of India, and Broadcasting Standard Authority. He currently serves as Director of Raj Institute for Contemporary Studies. It is a great privilege and honor to have you here, sir. We extend our gratitude time out of your busy schedule to take the session, and heartfelt gratitude to all the students present here for taking a keen part in the virtual program. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Start ചെയ്യാം, sir.
Okay. So I'd like to wish all the students a very good evening. നിങ്ങൾ എല്ലാവരും ട്രിവാൻഡ്രം ലോ കോളേജിൽ നിന്നാണോ അതോ മറ്റ് ലോ കോളേജസ് നിന്നുണ്ടോ?
വേറെ കോളേജസ്
ഉണ്ടല്ലേ? ഓക്കെ, ശരി. അപ്പൊ നിങ്ങൾ ഒന്ന് ഇൻട്രൊഡ്യൂസ് ചെയ്യുമല്ലോ അല്ലേ ബിഫോർ യു സ്പീക്ക്? ഐ വുഡ് ലൈക്ക്, ഇപ്പൊ നമുക്ക് 45 മിനിറ്റ്സേ ഉള്ളൂ. അപ്പോൾ നമുക്കൊരു എനിക്കൊന്ന് ആദ്യം ഒരു ഐ വുഡ് ലൈക്ക് ടു ടേക്ക് അബൌട്ട് 5 minutes or even little bit more to very briefly hear from you. Let's try to do it in 5 minutes of what you would like to hear on this topic. What would you like to hear? Freedom of the press, critical review, this is the topic. Appo namakku oru effectively oru half an hour 40 minutes e ullu. What is it you would like to know or discuss in this time? And I'm happy to address that. So namakku samayilla, anyone who wants to speak can speak, as many as possible. Just identify any questions or any issue that you would like to discuss.
Sir, I would like to know topic in 2021 context. Just that, sir.
കേട്ടില്ല ശരി കേട്ടില്ല.
Sir, I want to know regarding the topic in 2021 context.
Okay, ശരി, താങ്ക് യു. പേരെന്താണ്?
Sir, my name is Hegin Han.
Hegin, yes, Hegin. Thank you, Hegin. Thank you very much. So you want to know it in the current 2021 context, okay? And any particular concerns you have, Hegin, when you say 2021 context? Do you have any particular concern or particular question you had in mind as the 2021 context?
Yes, sir. From my reading and the best of my knowledge, I believe.
Yes.
Now, press decides.
Sorry, press?
The press can't criticize. Now, whenever there is criticism,
yes.
Severe actions are taken. So instead of knowing the constitutional perspective of the same, I want to know
yes,
how it is being implemented or how it is in the context of 2020.
Okay. Excellent. Very, very good question. Thank you.
Sir, I want to ask a question. My name is
Dhanush. Is it Dhanush, right?
I'm
Hello.
I'm Dhanush.
Yes, Dhanush. Please go ahead.
Whether the app of a free preventing the proper function is the where there is no freedom.
The voice is not clear. I hope my voice is clear. Your voice is not clear, Dhanush. Can you repeat kindly a little bit?
So my question is that the absence of a free market is a freedom of press.
Or actions, whether a free market will interfere with freedom of the press?
No. The absence of a free market.
Absence of a free market. Okay. Absence of a free market, will it interfere with freedom of the press?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Thank you. Very good question. A very good point, Anush. Yes. Thank you. Any other?
Sir,
yes.
Sir, നമ്മളെ മീഡിയക്ക് ഒരു ബയസ്ഡ് ആയിക്കൊണ്ടിരിക്കുകയാണ് പ്രസന്റ് സിറ്റുവേഷൻ. അപ്പൊ അതിനെപ്പറ്റി എങ്ങനെ റിസോൾവ് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റും ആ ഒരു പ്രോബ്ലംസ് ഒക്കെ?
അതെ, വളരെ നല്ല ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ ആണ് മേരി. അതെ, വളരെ നല്ല ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ ആണ്. മീഡിയ ബയസിനെ നമ്മൾ എങ്ങനെ, what to do about media bias? Very important question. Thank you, Mary. Anything else? വേറെ ആർക്കെങ്കിലും എന്തെങ്കിലും സജഷൻസ് ഉണ്ടോ? 3 സജഷൻസേ വന്നിട്ടുള്ളൂ.
എൻ്റെ പേര് ആഷിഖ്.
യെസ് ആഷിഖ്.
സർ, നമ്മളിപ്പോ KP ആക്ട് 118D വന്നല്ലോ.
അതെ അതെ അതെ.
അതിന് ഗവൺമെന്റിന്റെ ഒരു പർപ്പസ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്, അതായത് ഒബ്ജക്റ്റീവ് ഓഫ് ദ ലോ എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് ഫേക്ക് ന്യൂസ് സ്റ്റോപ്പ് ചെയ്യുക, അതുപോലെ ഹേറ്റ് സ്പീച്ച് സ്റ്റോപ്പ് ചെയ്യുക എന്നുള്ള ഒബ്ജക്റ്റീവുമായിട്ടാണ് വന്നത്. പക്ഷെ ഈ പർപ്പസ്ഫുൾ ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഫേക്ക് ന്യൂസും ഈ ഫ്രീഡം ഓഫ് എക്സ്പ്രഷനിൽ വരുന്ന ഒരു ഓണസ്റ്റ് മിസ്റ്റേക്ക്, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒരു ക്രിട്ടിസൈസ് ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ ഒരു ഓണസ്റ്റ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു മിസ്അണ്ടർസ്റ്റാൻഡിങ് വരുന്നതും തമ്മിലുള്ള ഒരു ബൗണ്ടറി വളരെ നാരോയാണ്. ഇക്കാലഘട്ടത്തിൽ ഫേക്ക് ന്യൂസുകൾ തടയേണ്ട ഒരു ആവശ്യകതയുണ്ട്. അതുപോലെ തന്നെ ഈ ഒരു അതേസമയം ഫ്രീഡം ഓഫ് എക്സ്പ്രഷനെ നമ്മൾ, അതായത് ഈ ഡെമോക്രസിയിൽ നമ്മൾ മീഡിയക്ക് കൊടുക്കേണ്ട ഒരു ഫ്രീഡം ഉണ്ട്. അപ്പോൾ ഇത് തമ്മിലുള്ള ഒരു ബാലൻസ് എങ്ങനെ ഒരു നിയമം വഴി നമുക്ക് സാധ്യമാകും എന്നുള്ളത് എത്രത്തോളം പോസിബിൾ ആണെന്നുള്ളതാണ് ചോദ്യം.
വളരെ നല്ല ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ. Is it possible to balance?
Yes, sir.
Is it possible to balance fake news with the freedom of the press? With freedom,
yes, sir.
Yes. Thank you very much. Very nice. Okay. Anything else? Very nice.
Sir, can I have one more question?
Yes, certainly.
Sir, my question is the influence of the management.
Yes.
With regard to the findings of a journalist.
Okay. Okay. So let's that's really പേരെന്തായിരുന്നു? ആഷിക്ക് കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ട് എനിക്ക് കണ്ടില്ല പേര്.
ഹെഗിൻ സർ.
ഹെഗിൻ വീണ്ടും. ഓക്കെ വെരി ഗുഡ്. മാനേജ്മെന്റ് വേഴ്സസ് ജേർണലിസ്റ്റ് ഫ്രീഡം. അപ്പോൾ നമുക്ക് ഇനി സമയമില്ലാത്തതുകൊണ്ട് ഈ ഇഷ്യൂസിനെ വെച്ചിട്ട് ഞാൻ ഒന്ന് രണ്ട് പോയിന്റ് പറയാൻ ശ്രമിക്കാം. വളരെ ലിമിറ്റഡ് ആയിട്ട് സമയമേ ഉള്ളൂ. ഇത് വളരെ വലിയൊരു ടോപ്പിക്കാണ്. സോ ഐ ട്രൈ ടു ഫോക്കസ് ഇറ്റ്. ഇപ്പോൾ ഈ the questions that you have raised fall in my view into two categories. One is where to draw the line. Criticism, fake news, bias. Because what you're saying is we want to allow criticism. And so the line should not be drawn to exclude criticism. We want to exclude fake news, so the line must be drawn to exclude fake news. We want to well, I suppose bias is not part of that. So criticism and fake news are 2 points where it has opposite views on drawing the line. One saying don't draw the line, let there be criticism. The other is saying draw the line on fake news. So the issue there is how do you draw the line on what is allowed and what is not allowed to be published as news and circulated as news. The second set of the other two questions that three questions that have been raised is on independence of the media. Independence in terms of not having bias. You should be independent, you should not be biased, the press should not be biased. And the second point is that management should not interfere with the independence of journalists. And the third point is a suggestion that for an independent press, you need free market rather than a government-controlled or state-controlled economy. So the two broad questions that you have raised in these, four of you have raised in these 5-7 minutes, is really to deal with contemporary challenges on two broad issues. How, what is the limit, what is the constraint, the restriction that we should put on the press? And secondly, what about how do you ensure independence of the press from management, from bias, and can you do it unless you have a free market? So let's examine these 3-4 issues. Now, we are law students, and therefore we also have to discuss it in terms of legal ideas and legal principles. And so I am going to look at both these issues and to convey to you the central question here from a legal point of view, the central question, and I will pose that central question by comparing and contrasting the architecture, the legal constitutional architecture for freedom and freedom of the press, because freedom of the press is part of larger freedom in the United States Constitution and in the Indian Constitution. So we can see, is there a problem in terms of the architecture we have developed around our constitutional protection and conception of freedom? And if so, should we not do something as lawyers through constitutional means to strengthen the constitutional protection of freedom? So let me make my position very clear. I give the highest priority to individual freedom and liberty as a general matter, and therefore I am on. So so that is where I come out personally, and the big question therefore is freedom something? Is individual liberty that? What is the value of freedom to us? This is the question. Is freedom valuable only in certain contexts and in certain, up to a certain limit, in a certain way, for a certain purpose? Or is freedom, unlimited freedom, unrestrained freedom, the supreme value on the basis of which our society should be built? Individual freedom. Can you have freedom for the country but no freedom for the individual? What kind, is that freedom for the individual? If my freedom is suppressed and they say my country is free, does that have any meaning? Alternatively, if every individual in a country is free, can a country not be free? Is there any possibility that the country will not be free if every individual in the country is truly free? What is the place of liberty? And is individual liberty, is it a potential problem, or is it a value which is the highest value that we must pursue without any compromise? Let me also say that maybe there are some people who want liberty for themselves but are afraid of liberty for others. So, especially the rulers, the rulers want complete freedom, including the freedom to control freedom. They want complete liberty and complete freedom because they're the rulers. But they're afraid of common people, poor people, uneducated people, illiterate people being completely free. It frightens them because they believe somehow that these the unwashed masses of any country do not have the capacity, either because God did not give it to them or society did not give it to them, or both. They don't have the capacity to use that freedom, quote unquote, correctly. And therefore, their freedom needs to be regulated and controlled and led and managed. So this is a philosophical issue. Now, against this philosophical issue, let us look at very briefly, within the time available, this is intended only to set you to think. If you look at the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, the so-called Bill of Rights, First Amendment, the first 10 amendments of the United States Constitution enacted in 1791 are together called, as you know, the Bill of Rights. The First Amendment says the Congress, which means the legislature, the central legislature. So let's use the word Parliament. Parliament shall make no law. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, an establishment of religion not relevant to our discussion today, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, not relevant today, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. So look at the architecture of that. It doesn't say that the Constitution guarantees or gives liberty to the people or gives freedom to the people, that the state is giving freedom to the people. Nothing. It simply takes away the power of the state to make or enforce any law abridging freedom of speech or freedom of the press. And there are other things, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. But let's just limit to this, or prohibiting the, so government, US Congress, our equivalent to our parliament, has no power to abridge freedom of speech or the press. Okay. Now look at our constitution. There will be very much debated. You must look at the Constituent Assembly debates on this topic. I'll briefly refer to that. Now, if you look at our preamble, you'll see, as you know, that the second objective of constituting India into a democratic republic is to secure to ourselves liberty of 5 kinds. Liberty, different from the word freedom, liberty. To secure to all its citizens, to secure. In other words, our constitution is not giving us liberty. Our constitution is creating a republic in order to protect, to secure the liberty that is already ours. Liberty of what? 5 types of liberty. Thought. It's a very good logic. I think, so thought. Expression. I express it, express some thoughts. Then my thoughts result in certain beliefs, results in faith, and the action of worship. So liberty of thought expression, belief, faith, and worship. As you know, Article 19(1)(a) says, the citizens shall have the right to freedom of speech and expression. So speech is added, expression is already in the preamble as part of liberty. So you take the 5 types of liberty mentioned here, as you know, of thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship, and you add to that speech, then you get a list of 6 specific types of liberty and freedom which the Constitution gives us. That the Constitution doesn't give us, but it says that the first part says the republic, we are creating a republic to secure to all its citizens, not all persons, all its citizens. Please remember that there are only 4 articles which are not available to all persons. The rest are available to all persons. One of those is 19. It's 15, 16, 19, and 29 are available only to citizens. So, and the preamble is also applicable only to citizens. So for citizens, the Republic is going to secure liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship. And in addition, the Article 19 gives us the right to freedom of speech and expression. A right is a claim. Is a claim. Now, this is a claim not just against a state. It's a claim we can have against anyone who restrains our right to our liberty, of which so you see the distinction between liberty and freedom. Liberty is something that we have, absence of restraint, and freedom is a right, is a claim that we have. When our liberty is restrained, we can use that freedom, that claim, to protect our liberty. So here, the state is giving us the right. Now, Article 19(2), as revised in our first amendment in 1951, now says, no time to go into the history of it, nothing in subclause A. So please remember, this was considered in the Constituent Assembly. 19(1)(a) did not say, subject to Article 19(2), all citizens shall have the right to freedom of speech and expression. So Article 19(1)(a) is unlimited. Like Article 14 is unlimited. The right to equality is not constrained. So they decided not to say subject to. That's very significant. But 19(2) says, nothing in 1A shall affect the operation of any law or prevent the state from making any law insofar as such law imposes reasonable restrictions on the exercise. Now, this is where judicial review came in, because initially the word reasonable was not there. Reasonable was included. On the exercise of the right conferred by the said subclause, and then there are 6 grounds. sovereignty, if you count it separately, sovereignty, 2, integrity, 3, security of the state, 4, friendly relations with foreign states, 5, public order, 6, decency or morality, and 7, contempt of court, and 8, defamation or incitement, and 9, incitement to an offense. So actually, if you break it down, you get 9 grounds on the basis of which our freedom of speech and expression can be restricted. Now, so we have one architecture under the Indian Constitution where we have the recognition of liberty, we have a right given to us to protect speech and expression, and that right is separately not made subject to, but another provision of the Constitution says the state can enact. Remember, the US Constitution says the Parliament cannot make a law. Here, 19.2 says the state can, and law can be made only by Parliament or legislature. So Parliament or state legislature can make a law to impose reasonable restrictions on our right to speech and expression for 9 grounds. So you can see the difference in architecture. What is the real heart of the difference here? The real heart of the difference here is, in the American architecture, you cannot limit freedom. You cannot limit freedom. So what can you do? What you can do is you can make illegal certain actions like violence, crime, certain actions which actually impinge the freedom of people. So we are all given freedom. Nobody's freedom can be taken away, except that I cannot use my freedom to take someone else's freedom away. So how can I take someone else's freedom away? By committing a crime or engaging in any violence or activity where I'm using force to compel. Why do I use violence? Against who do I use violence? I use violence against other human beings, or objects in which other human beings have an interest, whether it's nature, whether it is material objects in which other human beings are interested in. So directly or indirectly, I cannot use force in a way that will restrict the freedom of other individuals. Therefore, because of this philosophy that freedom cannot be restrained, cannot be balanced, must always be protected, including from other human beings. So the interventions are all to protect freedom, not to balance it, but to protect freedom. And therefore, with that kind of architecture, what has happened in US constitutional law over the last many now nearly over 200 years, 220 some years, 1787 was the constitution. And so we're coming into over 200 some years. So in this period, the US jurisprudence has developed some overarching principles on the kinds of actions that can be taken that will restrain the freedom of some people in order to protect the freedom of everyone, including themselves. And those principles began somewhere to get crystallized and articulated in the 19th century. And they're all related to actually to preventing violent action. So if it is non-violent, then there's no restraint except defamation or obstructing the actions of government, again affecting others. And defamation is affecting the freedom and the rights of others. So that's a separate remedy which you can exercise in court. So the overarching test that has been developed, I'm not going through its history, went through several stages of history, but today the overarching test that prevails in the US is that any individual's freedom can be restrained only when there is the likelihood of imminent lawlessness. So when speech and expression, I'm talking only of speech, when speech has the impact of imminent lawless action, not after a period of time, not after half a day, not after, so you saw incitement by Trump. That's a crime. Incitement is a crime. Inciting others to engage in lawless action or insurrection against the state. So regardless of the time period involved, when your actions, so people are coming to, Trump calls people to Washington, he assembles them, he makes a speech while the parliament, the Congress is in session, and they're deciding on who should be the president of the country, and then he encourages them to go and fight in parliament and stop the steal. And many people have said, he said that, so we went. So his speech, it is argued, we still don't know whether it is his defense says that it does not meet the standard of imminent lawless action, but the other side is arguing that it qualifies in the standard of imminent lawless action. So the two principles that we've seen, one architecture is to value liberty as not subject to any compromise. Like we have Article 14, the right to equality and equal protection before the law, the equal treatment before the law and equal protection of the law, not subject to any reasonable restriction. There is no restriction that can be placed on it. Similarly, freedom of speech and press, including freedom of the press. If you take one approach, because press is specifically mentioned in the First Amendment of the United States, freedom of speech or of the press. So they give great importance to the press. We don't have a special right on freedom of the press. It is covered by 19(1)A's general architecture. But we allow restrictions on 9 grounds. And that shows that at the end of the day, there was a group of people in the Constituent Assembly who wanted an unlimited, unrestrained liberty, subject only to restraints to protect other people's liberty. In other words, all action against liberty must be to protect liberty, not to balance liberty against something else, but to protect liberty, versus an architecture where we counted 9 other grounds, freedom of speech and expression, including freedom of the press, can be restrained. These are two different architectures. And therefore now we have plenty of scope in our constitutional architecture to constrain speech. Why? In the interest of all these grounds that have been laid out, including contempt of court and all these other grounds. And that shows to some extent that we probably, at the end of the day, a very conservative Constituent Assembly, full of a vast majority of who were conservative, rich, wealthy, landowning, male, Hindu, upper caste people, they were afraid of giving liberty to people at large, and they wanted constraints to be placed on liberty. And therefore they chose that architecture. And the press falls within that architecture. Therefore, we are also concerned about, we think it's legitimate to put restraints on the press, unrelated to protecting freedom, but protecting, for example, relations with other states, protecting if you take contempt of speech, it is the majesty of the courts, the state. To protect the state and its functioning is an adequate ground to restrain speech for us. Now, this is a philosophical question. My own view is that we must work towards reducing, as was argued in the Constituent Assembly, reducing and eliminating any restriction on freedom of speech and expression which is not to protect the freedom and liberty of others. If it is to protect other liberty, yes, I can't use my liberty to take away someone else's liberty. But short of that, we should take a view that we need to give overarching importance to liberty. So this is my main point, that our architecture is meant to constrain liberty, because the ruling folks are quite afraid of what will happen if the unwashed masses, uneducated, illiterate masses of India are given liberty, because they are Prakrit, they are not Sanskrit. They have Prakrit ideas, and they're not. This is it's completely I can't accept any of that argument. I'm Prakrit myself, and I think ultimately we're all human beings with our own understanding, our own minds, and we should learn to respect all people's and value all people's mind and freedom equally. Now let me in that context tackle the 3 or 4 questions or points that were raised. What is the relevance in 2021? In 2021, there are many ways of understanding 2021. What's going on in our country? Is it new? Did it begin only in 2021, or did it begin after the BJP came to power, or did it begin before that? When did it begin? Is India a story of a long struggle of the people for freedom and equality? In which case, what we may be seeing in the short term may be simply symptoms of what is a very long struggle. These are questions which we can debate, and there are many views on that. But one fact that I can point out is that it was in the 8th decade of the Constitution of the United States that they had their civil war. Like our Constitution, through the 1791 Bill of Rights, US Constitution introduced into a feudal society ideas of liberty and equality. And in the 8th decade of that Constitution, there was a backlash to these ideas, because the ruling classes in the South in those days in the United States were apprehensive, very apprehensive about the social change that was being generated by ideas of freedom and equality of the masses of Americans, ordinary Americans, many of whom were working class from working class background. So if you ask me, I often say that America is basically a Shudra society. The Shudras of Europe revolted against their social elites and came and created a new country, working class people. But there was an elite in the South, so the Shudra Americans of the North revolted against that. And in the 8th decade, they had a civil war, and they created a new, effectively, some people argue, a new mindset and a new approach, which gave primacy to liberty and freedom. And that then gave them the basis to build a very, very powerful country that has become very dominant in the world, to which people from all over the world, including India, go mainly because it offers them freedom and equality, these values for which they fought a civil war in the 8th decade of their independence. In the year 2021, India enters the 8th decade of our independence. We're at the same stage as the United States was in 1861. 7 decades, for the first time in the history of this country, we have 7 decades, we've had a constitution which gives us which has introduced the ideas of freedom and equality into our country. And there is a backlash against that. So where are we in 2021? We are again in the midst of a struggle over the ideas of freedom and equality. And the concern that freedom and equality should not be extended to all the people of this country, because they are not Sanskrit enough to have it. They are Prakrit people. They can't be entrusted with it. And so that's where we are in 2021. In the US, if the conservative view was from the South and the progressive view was from the North, it's exactly reversed in our country. 2021 crisis is primarily a crisis for democratization of Northern Indian society, particularly Northern Indian Hindu society. There is no crisis in the South. We've over the last 100 years and before that, we've gone through various processes of social reform that has democratized the society, especially the Hindu social order in the South, and overall social order much more than it has in the North. So hopefully what is going on in the North is also a positive struggle for democratization of the North Indian society, and it will, taking a cue from the South, it will eventually end in a more democratic social order in line with the values of the Constitution of freedom and equality, and provide India a much more solid basis for a united society and a united country, united not around hierarchy, but united around the ideas of freedom and equality. So hopefully that's where we are in 2021. So in this context, we must understand that criticism is not allowed only against these conservative ideas of social change. It is not that no criticism is allowed, but criticism cannot be made of conservative ideas. If you criticize progressive ideas, that's more than welcome. There's no restriction on that. If you criticize modernity, if you criticize unlimited freedom, unlimited equality, there's no constraint in 2021 on that. But if you argue for freedom and equality and you criticize the conservative ideas, yes, there is today very serious consequences. Some people have lost their lives and people are being physically attacked. And journalists and others who are advancing the constitutional vision of a free and equal society, even with this limited architecture. The limited architecture was forced on the soul and spirit of the Constitution by a Constituent Assembly. But it reflects the struggle of the common people of this country. The Constitution, ethos of the Constitution reflects the struggle of the common people of this country. And I will at the end come to that. We must protect that ethos. So we must not see in isolation simply that the press cannot criticize what is conservative, what is traditional, what is old. All that has the prohibition against criticism of anything that is old-fashioned, conservative, old, or reflecting the values of hierarchy, the values of inequality, the values of patriarchy, the values of or misogyny. These prohibitions apply not only to the press, but they even come to the classroom. They, I know teachers who are teaching in the northern part of this country, and they feel very constrained to discuss these issues even in their classrooms because there are consequences. So there is in the media, there is a pervasive concern in society that somehow India should not discuss these changes to our social order, but we should preserve the old and go back to the old social order. So the impact of these restrictions is really to prevent the social change, which is at the heart of the purpose of our Constitution, as I will come to in a minute or two. So as far as fake news is concerned, again, this is a separate issue from freedom. Freedom does not include the freedom to perpetuate lies, but the answer to perpetuating fake news and lies is not to restrain freedom, but to expose the lies and to hold people accountable for any consequences that arise from the lies. So we've got many civil and criminal provisions in our laws to, as you know, to proceed against false actions based on falseness. Not all actions based on falseness are illegal or criminal. That would be too broad. But actions which are illegal or criminal or deceptive or fraudulent, there are laws that define it. There are consequences, and we should deal with fake news not by limiting the freedom of the press, but by taking action effectively and improving the institutional capacity to take effective action against fraud and dishonest and basically against fraud being perpetuated on the people through fake news. So I've dealt with criticism, I've dealt with fake news. I was also a member of the News Broadcasting Standards Authority of the electronic media for some time. So we dealt with a lot of these issues of actual practical issues of fake news and so on. So there are mechanisms to deal with it. Now, when it comes to bias, there are two kinds of bias. We all have our bias. We all have our bias. If you go to a website run out of Harvard University called Implicit Bias, you can run some self-tests about your own bias on color, on race, on caste, on gender, on culture, on various types of bias, religion, and so we all have our bias. So I think what we need to do is to ensure that our decision making, especially public policy decision making, is kept completely free of bias. And that brings us to the very key question, which I think, again, architecturally is different between our constitutional law and constitutional law in the United States and some other countries, is what is the nature of the press? Is it a public function or purely a private function? Is it the fourth estate? Is one of the fundamental pillars of democracy along with the independent judiciary? I believe it is. I believe the press has a very, very important public function to play, that it requires special protection, not just ordinary protection. It requires protection no less than independence of the judiciary. It requires protection also from the judiciary. But for both the judiciary and the press, we also need robust and strong systems of accountability, so that if that freedom is abused and that independence is abused, then whether it's the judiciary or the media, they can be held accountable. But accountability for the media and for the judiciary is not as strong as it should be. There's need for a lot of improvement, but I do think that we must ensure that we must recognize the press as a public function, maybe with private ownership, like the bar. If you take the judicial system, except the judges and the prosecutors, the entire bar of the country is private. I'm one who believes that we need a strong public sector presence in the legal system. Like there are public prosecutors, we must have publicly paid public defenders. I think we cannot afford to have an entirely private sector bar in our country, because so many people cannot afford to get good quality private sector lawyers. But that apart, right now, the legal system is an example of a public institution with public responsibilities, protected by public laws on independence and so on, but where actually a lot of private people work for making money. Some of the top lawyers are amongst the richest people in our country. So similarly, in the press also, we must recognize its public nature, public responsibilities, the need for its protection as a public good, and then also recognize that there will be lots of people in the press who will be functioning as private individuals and private institutions, and that's fine. But we also need a good, solid public presence to ensure that that's why there in other countries also they have public, public broadcasting services and news services and other media presence of public, whether it's independent public or independent of the state or not, the institutions which are not motivated by profit. I think that's extremely important and valuable to have in the media. So I do think that, so the question of can we have a free press without a free market? I think we have a free market. I think, a free market is not, there are many countries in the world where there is a free market, but there is no free press. And so in fact, a free market very often produces oligarchies and concentration of wealth, which then starts to attack a free press. So that need not be, you don't have to get rid of the free market to have a free press either. But what we have to do is to ensure that whether it's a market or the press, they operate in a way that ensures accountability to the public interest in a transparent manner. So I think I've dealt with these issues that you have raised. There was also the question of the Kerala Police Act, how to distinguish between an honest mistake and how to balance fake news and freedom. I think I have answered that by saying we need strong institutions, fair, strong, transparent institutions of accountability to give us relief against the media. I've had a wrong report about me, completely baseless report about me, that I'm involved in some survey work in Kerala. It was published by the New Indian Express a few days ago. And I approached them. They said yes. They took down the online news. They published. They said they published. I haven't seen the publication. A denial from me. But they refused to accept that their report was without any basis, that they made a mistake. And so I'm now thinking, what's my remedy? How, where is the accountability for them for writing something that's completely fake, which kind of, affects, gives a wrong impression about what I do to people. I mean, nothing illegal or anything like that. But still something engaging in activities that I don't engage, public activities, but I don't engage in. Basically, they were arguing that I had a political role. I don't have a political role. I work as an independent academic, and I don't have a political role. And they wrote that I have a political role, and that was completely wrong. So yeah, so we don't have remedies, and I'm myself an example of that. And I was very disappointed by the attitude of the publication, that they really don't care very much about accepting their own mistakes, which I think I feel they should do. But I decided to talk about it rather than, so that people know that this is what's going on. At least that's one thing we can do. So let me stop here. Let me say, make it in conclusion. Let me say, it's 5 o'clock, that our constitution, just to take 2 minutes to understand our constitution. If you look at the preamble to our constitution, the first few words, it says, "We the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic." Right now, reflect on that carefully. We the people of India. So the people already exist before the republic. India exists before the republic. We, the people of India, have decided, solemnly resolved, to constitute India into something. The word constitute means to take something and create something new. So what this constitution is saying, we the people of India are taking what constituted India before the constitution, the elements that were there referred to as India, and to reconstitute those elements into something new called the Republic of India. And that's why this is called the Constitution. The Constitution is a process of creating something new, constituting something that already existed, something called India, our country, our ancestors' country, something beloved to us, something very, with a culture and history and our own connections with it, which is very precious and beloved to us. We are taking that most beloved and precious, precious relationship we have, and we are reconstituting it into something new. What is that something new? It's a democratic republic. And what does democracy mean? Democracy comes from two words, demos and kratos. Kratos, K-R-A-T-O-S, means power. Demos means common people. So democracy is not is not a process. It is not an institution. Democracy is a goal, a political goal. What is that political goal? That kratos, power, must be in the hands of demos, common people. It is a goal to transfer power from a ruling elite to common people. That's also the meaning of the republic. You know the word res judicata, res ipsa loquitur. The word res means a thing. Here it means the state. And republic means the res, the state belongs to the public. That's what republic means. So democratic republic means a state that belongs to the people, where power is in the hands of the people. So we want to take India, a land very precious to us, but a land ruled by a small oligarchy based on hierarchy and inequality and all kinds of poverty and social oppression, and lots of glorious things about it, a mixture of all of these things. We want to take this thing and constitute this community of people into a republic, a state owned by the people, which is a democracy, where power is in the hands of the people. And if power is in the hands of people, freedom and equality must be in the hands of common people. We can't restrain it. We can't balance it. If freedom is used to attack somebody else's freedom, we can have remedies for it. We can have legal consequences for it. But that is not balancing freedom. That, in my view, is the real architecture of the soul of this constitution. When we fought for Swaraj as our national, in our national struggle for independence, it was Swaraj for myself, individual Swaraj. There cannot be a Swaraj for India where there is no Swaraj for its people. But if every Indian has Swaraj, then India will always have Swaraj. Gandhi once said that it should never happen again that someone conquers Delhi and conquers India. And therefore, if Swaraj is deconcentrated to every Indian who has freedom and equality, then no one can conquer Delhi and conquer India ever again in our history, which is and we will be able to be a republic that will be a model to the whole world. So therefore, I think freedom of speech and expression is very central to us. And in this freedom of speech and expression, the freedom of the press is very vital and very central to the protecting freedom of citizens. It does not now have adequate protection, nor does it have adequate accountability. And so both its freedom and its accountability needs to be strengthened. And I hope young lawyers, upcoming lawyers like you, will devote your career and your lives to strengthening our liberty, our freedom of speech and expression, that of the press, and also strengthening accountability mechanisms to ensure that that freedom is protected. Let me stop here. I think I've gone 6 minutes beyond 5 o'clock. My apologies. I'm happy. I have a few more minutes. I'm happy to take any questions or comments. Hegin, do you have any reactions? You asked 2 questions, so I'm requesting you to share any thoughts you had. I can't hear you, Hegin.
No, sir, I have no more queries. I got it clear. Thank you. That was a wonderful lecture, sir.
Thank you, Hegin. Thank you.
Sir, it was a wonderful lecture. I'm Dhanush, and the lecture was very nice. But I'm happy that I have found a classical liberal.
Happy to
see a classical liberal like you. And I, being a conservative, I'm happy to see a classical liberal like. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I see. I'm a classical Prakrit. I don't know what liberal means, but I'm a classical Prakrit. I love the completeness and the wholeness of that we find in human beings as they are. Tagore wrote an absolutely stunningly brilliant poem, right? I'll read just 2-3 lines from it to explain what I mean. See, he wrote in 1917, he says, man, he means human. Man in his fullness is not powerful, but is perfect. So Tagore says every human being is perfect as they are. They don't have to measure to some outside benchmark to be perfect. We are perfect as we are. Then he says, but to turn this perfect human being into an instrument of power, you have to curtail his soul as much as possible. Because when we are fully human, we cannot fly at one another's throats. Our instincts of social life, our traditions of moral ideals stand in the way. And then he says, if you want me to take to butchering fellow human beings, you must break up that wholeness of my humanity through some discipline which makes my will dead, my willpower dead, my thoughts numb, my movements automatic. And then from the dissolution of the complex personal man will come out this abstraction, that destructive force which has no relation to human truth and therefore can be easily brutal or mechanical. Take away man from his natural surroundings, from the fullness of his communal life, with all its living associations of beauty and love and social obligations, and you will be able to turn him into so many fragments of a machine for the production of wealth on a gigantic scale. Finally, he says, turn a tree into a log. It will burn for you, but it will never bear living flowers and fruit. So that's why liberty is important. That's why liberty is important, that we have to let people be who they are, to be true to themselves. It's not just about doing whatever you please. It's about being true to yourself and respecting everyone in, as perfect as they are, and not being made to feel inadequate. Right? This is a very beautiful legacy. Now, I'm not sure. I think the reason I reacted to the word liberal is that we have a very important idea. All of humanity has a very important idea, which I think we emphasize in India a lot in all our religious traditions. I'm not a particularly religious person, but I know that we recognize it in all our religious traditions and our Dalit traditions, our scheduled caste, scheduled tribe traditions. And that is the idea of compassion, anukampa, karuna. And I think that is central to humanity. What Tagore is reflecting is that idea of compassion. Compassion is our ability to feel the pain of others, and how people, human beings born with compassion, are turned into brutal machines that actually attack each other. We say we are following the law of nature, that in nature animals kill each other, but they don't kill their own species. We are one of the rare species that attack each other. Yes, the lion will hunt the deer, but the lions won't hunt each other. So they look after each other. So we have to build. So I often think that the vision of the Constitution of India is to build a compassionate society. Compassion is the central idea of this Constitution, and the idea is to build a society where everyone will care for each other, and freedom and liberty of speech and expression, and a very important institution like the press that will be a true guardian of our freedom, of every individual, is, I think, very central to realize this goal and this objective. So I don't know what label you'll put on it. Maybe we just avoid labels, but we know that we want a country. Our Constitution is a dream that we will one day make a society where everyone is free and is equal. And that will be a solid basis for the unity and integrity and peace of this country. Thank you, Dhanush, for provoking me to saying that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yes, anyone else?
Sir, no,
Is this our admin speaking?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Which colleges are represented here? Trivandrum?
Trivandrum Law College.
No, which other colleges are represented here?
Calicut Law College.
Okay.
I think Hagen is from Calicut.
Sorry?
Sir, Hagen is.
Okay. Hagen is from Calicut. Okay. Okay.
So shall we conclude by
Yes, please. Thank you.
So let's a vote of thanks. So I invite
Good evening to one and all. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our resource person, Professor G. Mohan Gopal sir. He had covered the topic freedom of speech and media as a critic in a very precise and informative manner. I extend my Sincere thanks to Mohan Gopal sir, who took time out of his busy schedule to preside over this session. On behalf of the Government Law College Trivandrum and all faculties and participants of this certificate course, I once again express my sincere gratitude and thanks to you, sir. Thank you, sir. And now I would like to thank our principal, Dr. Bijukumar sir, who facilitated the initiative for this course. And now I express my thanks to all faculties and coordinators behind this virtual gathering. Last but not least, I thank all the participants who are out of there. And once again, thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Priyanka. Sir, once again, on behalf of Government Law College and all the participants, our college is expressing our sincere gratitude and thanks to you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, audio mute ആണ് പിന്നെ.
Sorry, ഞാൻ mute ചെയ്തിരുന്നു. I just want to thank the students for your time and attention. Thank you very much, and for your excellent points at the beginning. And my apologies for the delay in getting in, because I couldn't get the link properly. So thank you very much. I tried to focus on one or two, because time was limited. I focused on one or two aspects only, rather than become comprehensive. So I'm sure you have lots of other questions. I'm happy to talk further if you wish on this topic. Thank you so much, and good evening, everyone.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.